Okay, we're going to talk about special parallelograms since we've already discussed the properties of parallelograms. So we're going to talk about those three different ones that are all parallelograms, but they have other special characteristics that make them what they are. So first, let's reiterate the properties of a parallelogram since all special parallelograms have the same properties as a parallelogram. So they have opposite sides are congruent. They have that opposite sides are parallel. The opposite angles are congruent. The consecutive angles are supplementary. And the diagonals bisect each other. Okay, so everything we talk about in these set of notes has all of these properties plus some. All right, so the first one we're going to discuss is a rectangle. Okay, so you guys are very familiar with a rectangle. A rectangle, in order for it to be a rectangle, has to have 4 right angles. Okay. And so when we have to complete our rectangle here. We also know that rectangles, just like parallelogram, opposite sides are congruent, opposite sides are parallel. So their fourth point would end up over here to keep the sides congruent and parallel. And so this would be our rectangle. And like we talked in the notes, that rectangles have 4 right angles, which are here, which we could test by checking to make sure the top lines and the side lines are perpendicular to each other. Okay, so that's how we get the right angles. In a rectangle, also, the diagonals are congruent. So not only do they bisect each other because they're parallelograms, but they will be congruent to each other as well. And so we had to place, this time I only gave you 2, but then we'll place the other 2 points. We'll go there, still making our diagonals with the same size, top and bottom, left and right. And then so if we draw in our rectangle, and then we know that our diagonals are congruent. We got that diagonal and this diagonal. But because they're congruent, even when they bisect, all the bisected pieces will be the same. Okay? And then we have the rhombus. And here are the characteristics that make a rhombus a rhombus. A rhombus has 4 congruent sides. That means all 4 sides are the same. So I could do it this way because the distance between the 2 vertical points is 4. So I can make this one down here, which is 4, which is a little bit off the graph. So then this could be the rhombus here. And that would have all 4 sides congruent there. But in this case, like we talked about in parallelograms, I could also go to the different direction and make our other point to make our parallelogram, our rhombus, go the other way. So then our rhombus could come over that way, and it would look like this, which would be the red one. Either one is a viable option if you had to complete that rhombus. Okay. All right, the next characteristic is that diagonals are perpendicular to each other. That means not only do they bisect each other, but when they bisect each other, they cross at a 90-degree angle. And then we could get our rhombus here, where we got the sides are congruent. And then we can see our diagonals bisect at a 90-degree angle. Okay. Now, as you can see, these diagonals do not have to be congruent, but they do bisect each other, and they are perpendicular to each other. Next, in a rhombus, the diagonals bisect the opposite angles, meaning they cut the angles they are in half, and none of the other parallelograms so far have done that. So we're going to complete our rhombus here. We have that. And the diagonals bisect these angles. So this angle is congruent to here, these congruent to there. And same on this side. Okay? So you can always do that. And then when we talk about a square has all properties, has everything of the parallelogram, has everything of a rectangle, and has everything of a rhombus. A square is all three rolled into one. Okay? So we had to complete our square. And so therefore we know has all four congruent sides like a rhombus, has four right angles like a rectangle. The diagonals are going to be congruent to each other, but they're also going to bisect each other and they are going to cut 90 degrees. They're equal, and it cuts the 90-degree angle into a 45-degree angle. Okay? So just like with parallelograms, you need to make sure you have these characteristics memorized for each shape.